Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of Wellness in the Workplace. My name is Mbali Mzinyane, and I am your host. Wellness in the Workplace is a podcast that aims to equip new and experienced professionals with the tools and insights to navigate challenging workplace dynamics. And on today's episode, we are talking about a topic that has gotten a lot of attention and popularity in recent years. We're talking about narcissism in the workplace, particularly from the perspective of how to deal with a potentially narcissistic boss. And I am talking to an expert on this because it is such a complex subject that needs expertise and insight from someone who has studied and understands the subject of narcissism. I am speaking to clinical psychologist Batetshi Matenge and also the founder of Atisa Wellness Consulting. Welcome to Wellness in the Workplace.
Good morning, Bali. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. When I was thinking about this topic, which came from a video that I would say went viral on
Mm,
Instagram around
mm,
dealing with toxic bosses, you're someone that came into mind because obviously of your expertise, but I think also of the insight that you would be able to share with
mm,
our audience around what narcissism is, the differences between narcissistic traits and a formal diagnosis such as
mm,
narcissistic personality disorder, and also how a potential viewer, can spot the signs and potentially self-preserve and protect themselves in the process. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of our topic, I think it's
mm.
always good to contextualize our guests so that you give the viewers, the listeners, just an understanding of who you are and your expertise. So can you tell us a bit more about you and the work that you do?
Sure, Bali. Happy to. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Yes, so I am a clinical psychologist. I'm in private practice
Mm-hmm.
in Bryanston, and I do clinical work, but at my practice on a daily basis. So that's what takes a lot of my time.
Mm,
And I see all kinds of clinical presentations, as well as just, other life transitions, individuals that come to me and they're going through a life transition, a career
mm,
transition, they're
mm,
becoming a mother, or they want to start a business.
mm.
So those are the kinds of individuals that I see at my practice. And outside of my practice, I do some consulting work
Mm,
for organization to promote wellness in the workplace
mhm.
through my company called Atisa Wellness Consulting.
Yeah.
And yes, so that's really the work, how I spend my time
Yeah.
in terms of being a psychologist.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. So, diving into the topic at hand, I mean, narcissism or the term narcissist is something that has really, really gained a lot of attention over the years. And I think in some cases it has been used incorrectly.
Mm,
And so, to ensure that there's a common understanding and baseline of what it is and what it isn't, can we start by really just defining what narcissism is?
mm, mm. So yeah, so I was very excited when you you actually wanted to speak about this topic because
Yeah.
for those reasons, right? I think
Mm,
that narcissism has been quite a topic the
mm,
past couple of years,
mhm.
and I think that it's really been leaning more towards the negative aspects of
Sure,
narcissism, and I
sure.
think there are parts of narcissism that are excluded from the conversation,
Mm,
because when we think about narcissism, we actually know that there are two types of narcissism. So there's a healthy
mm,
aspects of narcissism, and then
mm.
there's unhealthy aspects of
Sure.
narcissism, which I think is what the conversation has been about.
Yes.
And a healthy narcissism is really that something that we all actually have.
Mm,
That we all have a level of narcissism inside of us, that allows us to do the things that we want to do. It's a healthy sense of confidence, for
Sure.
example, that, I as Batetshi or as Mbali, I feel confident that I can achieve this and that and that.
Sure.
Or I can, go towards this goal that I've been trying to achieve, etc. That's a healthy sense of confidence that I can do this. I'm good at this.
Sure.
That's healthy. And then there is the unhealthy aspect of narcissism, which is then characterized by an elevated sense of importance. When someone really feels that they're better than other people.
Sure.
And they have this sense of entitlement as well about the world and what they deserve, what they feel they're owed, what they feel is just they deserve. And also with narcissism, or the unhealthy aspect of narcissism, there's this deep-seated need to be admired.
Sure.
So excessive levels of needing to be admired and wanting to be the center of attention, and always, you being at the forefront of conversation, or always positioning yourself as better than other people, and also a sense of this interpersonally, when you're relating, when people who we describe as having narcissistic traits or are narcissists, often also struggle in relationships, whether it's social relationships or professional relationships. There's a real struggle in knowing how to relate and how to be with other individuals, and how they can actually relate with others is through exploitation.
Sure.
That the only way they know how to be interpersonally is that they're exploitative. So they can be exploitative to in relationships to get what they want or what they feel they deserve. So those are some of the characteristics. But I think also one that is often spoken about is this lack of empathy for others, just an inability or an incapability to put yourself in other people's shoes, and a complete dismissiveness of other people's feelings, other people's thoughts, other people's contributions, so those are some of the sort of characteristics of unhealthy narcissism.
Yeah. And just in maybe taking it a step further, then, what would be the difference between narcissistic traits and then a diagnosis such as narcissistic personality disorder?
Let's think about narcissism on a spectrum.
Okay.
That narcissism lies on a spectrum, right? So on the far end of the spectrum, you have some traits of narcissism. And then it goes all the way to the far end of the spectrum, where it is where the unhealthy narcissism lies. And it's more of how you operate in the world. It's more of a personality structure.
Sure.
That this is how you see the world, how you engage in the world. So that's very different from someone with narcissistic traits. Someone who's a bit maybe boastful at times, or someone that can be selfish at times, or a bit rude at times. They, in those moments, they're displaying their narcissistic traits, but not necessarily that they are narcissists in that way.
Yes.
So narcissism is actually it's a very sad diagnosis, really sad, because it really is a condition of an internal emptiness.
Sure.
Because what narcissists struggle with is that deep sense of emptiness and self-loathing, that beneath the grandiosity, beneath the high sense of self-regard, without the status, because
Yes.
narcissists are often very status driven, and without those associations and those possessions, those positions, beneath that lies a deep sense of emptiness. So really, actually, the expression of narcissism is to try and cover that emptiness. So you often find that the individuals really struggle a lot emotionally. And there are different types of narcissists
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
And
Let's talk about those.
yes.
Yeah.
So there are different types of narcissists, or how narcissism can present in different individuals,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So I think what we're commonly used to is the grandiose narcissists.
Yes,
We know
yes,
those, right?
yes.
The individuals who speak excessively about themselves and share their achievements, sometimes exaggerated achievements,
Sure.
by the way. And those we know. So that is a grandiose narcissist. But we have other kinds of narcissists. So we have more of the vulnerable
Okay.
narcissist
Okay.
who is not as extroverted
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
the grandiose
Would
narcissist.
that be the covert narcissist?
You could say that that's a
Okay.
covert
Okay.
narcissist as well.
Okay.
Yes, but covert, vulnerable narcissists are, so they do have similarities with grandiose narcissists in that they can get very aggressive.
Yes.
And with individuals as well, but they don't like attention.
Sure.
So they won't be in the spotlight.
Sure.
Whereas with grandiose narcissists, they are the ones in the spotlight. They perform for it. They love the attention, and they crave that attention. And sometimes they even dramatize situations or events to get the attention back onto themselves if they feel threatened by someone else. So with the vulnerable narcissists, they're not quite like that. They don't present like that. But there is that sense of envy in relationships. So very envious and very competitive, and a constant need to put themselves above other people. So that's the vulnerable narcissist. And also what happens with the vulnerable narcissist is that when narcissists feel threatened, or they feel attacked or criticized, any whiff of criticism actually shatters narcissists. So it can go. So the reaction to that can either be that they withdraw, and the vulnerable narcissists are more likely to do that. They are more likely to withdraw, completely withdraw from social interactions or professional settings, and they shut down as an attempt to recover because they feel injured.
Sure.
But other times, the grandiose narcissists, they may respond more with attacks.
Okay.
They will respond more with attacks, and they will become more rageful, as a way to again protect that threat internally.
Yeah. So I mean, all of these traits and scenarios that you've painted, in my mind, I'm already seeing them play out in the workplace, and how that could potentially affect a team, a subordinate, or potential colleagues. But to be more specific, maybe with somebody who's just listening or watching, who doesn't really have a good grasp of what that looks like practically in the workplace, what would you say are some of the common challenges that then employees face when they're trying to navigate a relationship with a potential narcissistic boss or even a colleague? What would that play out as?
The presentation of narcissism is so complex, right? In that when you are dealing with someone like that, you want to always pay attention to how they present, how they present themselves, and you want to observe them. You want to observe how they interact with individuals, how they interact with you when you are, in a way, feeding their narcissism.
Okay. What would that look like, the feeding of the narcissism?
So that is, brushing their ego, for
Got you.
example, being like a mirror to them. Anything that's good, if you mirror anything good to them, they you will come under their wing. They will like you. You will be, like a favorite employee.
Sure.
You will have a really positive relationship with them. So I mean, as you can imagine, working with someone who constantly wants to have their attention and wants to have a center stage doesn't quite allow for collaboration.
Sure.
Right, in teams. So working with an employee or a colleague or a boss who presents like that makes it very hard in terms of team dynamics, collaboration, and to also build trust amongst team members. Because what often happens with individuals with narcissistic presentations is that because of their deep need for admiration, what they conversely do to people around them is that they devalue.
Sure.
They devalue them. They devalue their efforts. They devalue their contributions at work. So this is a kind of boss who will not maybe highlight the good work that you're doing, but may want to present it as if it is theirs, that it is of their doing, it is of their creation, because again, it feeds something inside of them. So they won't acknowledge other employees or team members, which can lead to feeling unappreciated and unsupported as a subordinate or as an employee, which really makes it a hostile working environment. But also, what happens as well when you do try to speak up to a narcissist is that you'll be met with deep rage.
Sure.
Deep rage or hostility. So that's often also, those are the signs actually to look out for in terms of how someone responds to you when you come to them and say you want to have a collegial conversation to say, I have some concerns about this aspect of my work or our working relationship, etc. And their response oftentimes is hostility.
Sure.
They may lash out. They may become very angry and very aggressive.
And what does this do then to the overall mental well-being of an employee or subordinate, reporting into a potentially narcissistic boss, or you said narcissistic presenting boss, or even a colleague at that? What does that do to just their mental state and in them trying to rationalize their reality?
It is unlikely that you will not be impacted by this level of hostility and tension, and someone who responds in that way. So it is actually unlikely that you will be unaffected by it. So it will impact your sense of self, your self-esteem, your self-confidence.
Sure.
It will really attack your self-confidence as an employee, which is something that you need, right, to perform, to do well at work, to progress. You need to feel confident in the work that you produce. You want to feel like you're contributing. You want to feel valued, and not constantly being undermined and made to feel like you are redundant or useless, because that's what happens, is that they really go below the belt.
Sure.
Narcissists, and they attack in ways that ordinary individuals can never respond in the same way.
And so then how does one maintain the sense of self-esteem, their confidence, and just an understanding of their reality. Because from what I've read, one of the other common tactics is around gaslighting. And maybe if you can speak to that, and how that can affect one's self-confidence and self-esteem, and with that in mind, how you can then maintain that sense of self and confidence, knowing that, you can't internalize some of the things that they are doing or saying to you about your work, or even just about you as a person.
But yeah, I think what you've just said now is so important, right? Is really what's important is firstly it's educating yourself.
Sure.
Educating yourself on different personalities and how people present, and not in a way to diagnose or analyze. You can, we're not super ethically, we don't do that.
Yeah.
But just try and understand what motivates people, and why people sometimes behave or act the way that they do. Because if you understand that these are exactly what you say, these are tactics, then it will help create some emotional distance for you.
Sure.
And you won't over-identify with their attacks that will often be hurled at you by a narcissist. Because what happens with narcissists is that they will attack and attack and attack and attack, and you end up feeling like, geez, you feel beat down, right? And then you start over-identifying with the thing that they say you are. And so it's really important to understand that you want to create an emotional distance and not over-identify with the attacks that the narcissist will throw at you, because they'll always throw something at you. And because they thrive in chaos and drama, they will do that. They will constantly do that. That's something that you can almost feel guaranteed will happen. And so you want to create some distance from that emotionally.
Yeah. And I think it's also just important to understand the difference between managerial behavior, right, versus a behavior that's indicative of a potential narcissistic boss. Because in our recent interview, actually, with a workplace bullying practitioner, she went a level down to say there is a difference between being bullied and being managed because of your performance. And similarly, I think it can be said with narcissistic bosses that there's managerial behavior that's related to the performance of your work. Then there's behavior that is associated because of the personality of the boss that you're dealing with. So in your view, what do you think are some of the things that we can just note in terms of this is what a manager, for example, would be doing to try and manage performance and behavior, and this is what a narcissist would be doing? So, for example, if you're presenting, a piece of work and a manager would give constructive feedback, how would a narcissist manage that? If you are late for work, for example, a manager would say, can we just talk about this, consistent pattern of you coming in late for work? How would a narcissist manage something like that? If there's also team dynamics, maybe, that just come from personality differences, I think a manager would typically say, can we sit down and have, a session around team cohesiveness and to just strengthen collaboration within the team, versus a narcissist? How would they manage that in those three scenarios I've just shared?
What you need to, as an employee or as a person receiving the feedback, is to differentiate whether this feels like an attack,
okay,
or it's constructive feedback. Because how narcissists operate is that they offer attacks and not anything sort of that is constructive, and it attacks your character, or attacks or it also attacks something that they envy in you. So you want to ask yourself those questions, that does this feel like an envious attack?
Sure.
Because they will use opportunities to enviously attack you so that they feel good about themselves. So so it's always about them. It's always about the action and what that action will feed and do for them.
And are there then any long-term consequences for employees who endure prolonged exposure to a narcissistic boss?
Yes, I think it goes back to what we spoke about earlier on, about really it impacting your self-confidence and your self-worth. And for individuals that are already struggling with their self-esteem, which oftentimes narcissists are quite strategic as well about who they bring quite close to them.
Okay.
They're very strategic about who they want close to them, so that those individuals can almost be their own extensions. They can constantly have a narcissistic feed, because narcissists thrive on the feed, the ego stroking. So that's what they thrive on, and in order for that to exist, they need people, right, to do that for them. So they will surround themselves by specific kinds of individuals.
Okay. What are those individuals typically?
Well, individuals who sometimes are more prone to people pleasing.
Okay.
So individuals who are more prone to people pleasing, or also very conscientious individuals. So if we talk about work, right, individuals that take themselves very seriously, they take their work seriously, and they take performance seriously. They will work very hard, and the narcissist will exploit that. Because remember, they operate through exploitation. So they will exploit, the positive attributes that individuals have, so that it benefits them. So, if you're a hard worker, they will exploit that. And so that it benefits them, because it makes them look good, right? So if I'm surrounded by 5 Mbalis who are extremely hardworking, it makes me look good to the people that I report to, so to the superior people. Because remember, again, narcissists have an elevated sense of self. So really, they want to be associated with the top achievers, as well as those people in power. So if you're going to make them look good, then they will like you for as long as you make them look good. But the minute you question their behavior, or you want to have a conversation, a collegial conversation about a concern that you have, then it changes. Then you are no longer the hardworking Mbali. Then they will find something about you, or a vulnerability of yours, and then start devaluing you. And that's often where, that's a point at which you often hear, individuals, or, who say that, that this person is now going around on a smear campaign, to really sort of discredit you to other individuals, because that's also a tactic where they will then triangulate. They will involve people in your conflict and the drama, so that you will then be seen as less than, or you will be discredited, because you're no longer their feed. You're no longer feeding the narcissism.
I think what you're speaking to as well is the typical cycle or trajectory, if you want to call it that, of a relationship, right, with a potentially narcissistic boss or colleague, is that it does start with that, putting you on a pedestal, yes, and elevating you because they want something from you. And once you show either inconsistency or, like you said, a critique or feedback on how they relate to you, then you become almost a target. And then that's where the devaluing comes in. And I mean, because of how much literature is also just out there, given the popularity, I think the last step that I've read up on is also just the discarding of the individual. And can we talk a bit more about that? What that discarding then looks like in the workplace? Could it manifest potentially as, sabotage? Could it manifest as you losing your job? And if you can spot that maybe that's where the relationship is right now with your potential narcissistic boss, then what do you do? What can you do practically?
And that's the really painful part of the process as a person on the receiving end, isn't it? That you then become almost, you're discarded and you're cast aside, and they will go very far to ensure that. And that's the thing about narcissism, is that they're very damaging.
Sure.
They're very, very damaging. They can be very damaging. And when you're no longer a feed, then they can go as far as sabotaging your career. They can go as far as you trying to leave, trying to get a job, because remember, these are individuals who are often on power.
Sure.
They hold positions of power.
Sure.
Because those positions often attract individuals,
those kinds of personalities.
Yes, with higher traits. Because with those positive traits. So a person with power like that can be damaging to your career. And when you do try to leave, this is a person that can sabotage your opportunities because of that power. They can, kind of call that other CEO or that other manager and say, I don't think Mbali is
a good fit.
Is a good fit.
Oh, that's so painful. That's so painful. So then, do you think there's a role that organizations, and a responsibility actually, that they can play in ensuring that, I don't know if it's managing these types of personalities, or assessing, or just making sure that there's a level of scrutiny or screening that happens, because it is quite damaging in the long run. I can't imagine, having a narcissistic boss and having so many employees who've been on the receiving end of this. The likelihood is that people will leave. The likelihood is that there'll be a high turnover. There'll be inconsistency in the team. It'll affect their performance. It'll affect productivity, because people are working in a state of fear potentially. So what do you think organizations can practically do just to manage these types of personalities, and to ensure that there is at least some progression towards healthier workplaces?
I mean, what immediately comes to mind, Bali, is power. Is that organizations really need to keep individuals who are assuming positions of power in check. They really need to check their power. So they need to put systems in place and processes in place that really expects accountability.
Sure.
From managers or senior
leaders
in the organization. So I think that's the first thing, because with narcissism is that also they're very, very charming. These are very charming individuals if who they can present in a particular way to people they regard as superior,
Sure.
because they want to be associated with these people. So they can be very, very charming, which can make it very difficult for an employee who is disgruntled and goes to HR and reports a manager and says, "This is what I'm struggling with." And then then this manager comes in and then sweeps them off their feet. This happens. It happens all the time. And that's why, for me, the conversation around holding individuals in positions of power accountable is so important.
Ooh, yeah. I think at the risk of misusing this word, I am feeling a little triggered.
I think that word should stay in the
because as you're talking, I'm like, I have either been on the receiving end or witnessed certain aspects and elements of what you're describing. And I'm sure, people who are listening or viewing this can also relate. And because it typically goes unchecked, it does bring in that sense of helplessness and also hopelessness on the person on the receiving end, to a point where you feel like you have no choice but to leave, and it does cause a bit of instability in terms of your career plan and potential development and trajectory. So yeah, this does have real life effects and implications on employees. So just to talk more then about the other work that you do in the wellness space, so you recently started a consultancy called Atisa Wellness Consulting, and I want to talk about that and maybe how you could potentially help organizations around topics such as detecting narcissistic personalities and how they could maybe help employees in need of just some rehabilitation. Yeah.
Yes, Mbali. So as I mentioned, outside of my clinical practice, I do some consulting work, and really the consulting work for organizations is to promote mental wellness in organizations, and this is through workshops, facilitations, mediations. Some change management processes as well, where I become involved, or putting together programs for organizations, programs that aim to improve the well-being of their employees. So yes, that's what I do with my other time.
With your other time. Yeah. And hopefully just also bringing a sense of awareness, right, on these types of issues in the workplace. And this is also one element of bringing that awareness, just coming onto this platform and just talking about, narcissism and a deep dive in terms of how it can manifest in the workplace. But then just in closing, I usually close off with some bonus questions that I ask my guests. The first question is, what podcast, video, book, or article have you listened to or read that shifted or changed your perspective about work? And in addition to that, how did it change your perspective about work?
So, I'm not a corporate.
Yes.
I'm not a corporate girl,
yes.
but so it's not a recent book, actually. So the book that comes to mind is a book I read. It must have been in a couple of years ago, 2016, which I still think it's a great book. So the title of the book is Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett. So he is a lecturer at Stanford.
Okay.
And he teaches design thinking principles. And so the book really is about applying design thinking into building a life that you want, building the life that feels meaningful, that feels purposeful, and that is different aspects of your life. So personal life as well as your professional life. So I think that's still a goodie. I absolutely loved it. I mean, the ideas are not necessarily, revolutionary, but the concept of applying design thinking principles into building your career is, I find it quite phenomenal.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, because design thinking has also been quite popular in the corporate space, right? Specifically, like in product development teams, and designing a way of operating and a way of getting, for example, a product to market. So it will be interesting just to read that and find out how you can get your life to the market. All right. Second last question. What does wellness in the workplace look like for you?
Wellness in the workplace for me, I would say, is an environment, a good enough environment that fosters the well-being of its employees.
Sure.
And that promotes thriving, an environment that allows for employees to achieve some of their personal pursuits, but also express their innate gifts and passions.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Any closing remarks about our topic, about the work that you do, or anything that you feel like you may have not shared during our conversation?
I think I'll just go back to where we sort of ended the conversation earlier on, which was on quite a painful note about the impact that narcissism can have on individuals. And what I would really want to emphasize and stress to the viewers is to understand really that narcissism, or individuals with narcissistic structures, are deeply wounded. These are individuals who are deeply wounded, and what they try to do is that they try and evacuate that into other people. So always hold that in mind, that you're dealing with someone who is trying to evacuate their own sense of emptiness and lack of self-worth into you. And that might help you, that might help create some emotional distance for you so that you protect yourself, that it's really not about you. That old adage of it's not about you. It's really more about the other person.
Sure. I think that's so powerful. It's really, really powerful. Thank you so much for that.
Right.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight. I think you've just shed a new light on a very important topic, and just also bringing awareness and just practical approaches in terms of how one can go into the workplace a lot more empowered. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mbali.
Amazing.
Thanks for having me.
Amazing.
Just one last thing.
Yes.
Please, let's move away from the labels.
Yes.
Let's move away from the psychobabble of labeling and trying to diagnose individuals, because we don't do that.
Yes, I agree. I fully agree with that. So thank you so much.
Okay,
and thank you for tuning in. This is Wellness in the Workplace. Thank you for your continued support, and we will continue bringing you topics that are relevant and that leave you empowered to walk into the workplace with a new perspective. My name is Mbali Mzinyane, and I will catch you on the next episode. Bye-bye.